Some language courses advertise themselves as letting you learn a language the same way you learned your native language. But if you think about it, that's not a very good idea. After studying my native language for more than a year, all I could say was mommy, daddy, and hungry. Really, what some of those language courses are trying to say is that you'll be immersed in the target language and will just pick it up naturally. This is sometimes called the direct method, and linguists like it because they feel it cuts out the middleman, your native language, so that you're immediately learning to think in the target language. But there's no guarantee you won't end up thinking in your own language anyway. Now, the question of what method is best for learning a new language can be a hotly debated topic, but there's a strong argument to be made that leveraging your own native language to learn another can make things easier. For example, with mnemonics. Say you're learning Maori, the Polynesian language spoken in New Zealand. With mnemonics, you might learn the Maori word for dog, kuri, by just thinking of a dog eating curry. Eventually you would just think of kuri as dog and not really need to think of the curry. But with the direct method, they might instead repeatedly show you a picture of, say, a tree, along with the Maori word for tree, raku, raku, raku. A problem with some direct method courses is that because they can't use your native language to explain the grammar to you, they spend a lot of time teaching model sentences like, "the boy is running." This doesn't make much difference if you're definitely planning to become completely fluent, since you'll want to learn everything anyway. But the truth is, you'll almost never use sentences like, "the boy is running." In fact, at first, most of your conversations will be the same ones, talking about how you learned the language, paying for things, asking for directions, etc. Because of this, it can sometimes be better to start by learning specific, highly useful dialogues and covering various different ways those conversations might go. Since you're learning entire phrases and sentences instead of forming them yourself, you'll speak fluently right from the beginning. Now, when it comes to pronunciation, here it's better to have as much exposure to native speakers as possible. Of course, it's ideal to live somewhere where that language is spoken, but you can also just spend time listening to broadcasts over the internet, even if you don't understand what's being said at first. Another thing to consider about learning a language is that once you're at an intermediate or advanced level, your main task becomes simply piling large amounts of vocabulary into your brain. At this point, the mnemonics become very handy, though they might not always be foolproof. Do you remember which of these Maori words you learned earlier and what they meant? Was kuri, the word for dog, easier to remember than raku, tree? Or not necessarily? Anyway, it's something worth thinking about as you learn a new language.